This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. I am a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas, and comments. Today, we're going to talk to Mark Crowley, who has a wealth of experience within the banking world and within knowledge about leadership. So we're going to talk today and get a great insight. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me on, Mark. I appreciate it.
Excellent. I'm so glad you could join me today. So today we're going to talk about your career, your experiences. Going to delve a little bit into your idea of leadership, because I know that's a key point for you that you've talked about extensively before. Hopefully, I'll ask some interesting questions for you to answer as well. But I'm going to go all the way back to the origin story. So you went to University of Washington and University of California. Do you want to just tell me what you studied and what experiences and things did you get from that experience?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a bigger story of going to University of California at San Diego, and it's funny you say origin story. My origin story is the whole story. In other words, and I got to go back a few more years and tell you just sort of in a quick synopsis to say that my mother died when I was very young, and my father was a psychologically abusive and emotionally abusive person who really was almost intent upon destroying me and my sense of well-being. And he was very directly critical of me for my entire childhood. And then he remarried after my mom died. He was having an affair with a woman, and she was no more caring than he was. And when I got out of high school, ready to go to college, my father literally kicked me out of the house, just saying it's time for you to move on. There was no hostility. I hadn't done anything, but I wasn't expecting it either.
Right.
And so what ended up happening was that, he had told me I would never amount to anything, that I had no worth and value. And so when I started to go to college, I had just been kicked out. I had no money. He wasn't providing for tuition or a room and board or anything. I only saw my father 3 or 4 more times before he died about 15 years later. And so I was on my own, literally, in an instant, like overnight. All of a sudden, I'm living by myself and, having to fend for myself and figure out how I'm going to survive, while also believing that if I didn't graduate from college, that he would have been right. That I would never have amounted to anything, that I would have been a complete failure. You told me that you fundamentally lack, you'll never amount to anything. So I always had that in the back of my mind. And I think in some respect, I used it as sort of a weak motivator, a strong motivator, but the wrong reason for it. But at least it forced me to say, I got to do whatever I can possibly do to get through college. Right. So I should have been kicked out of college my freshman year because, it was so, I didn't do any of the work. I didn't often go, but I had professors that knew kind of what was going on and they were supportive. And then I kind of figured it out and ended up doing very well. And so I was an English literature major in college. That's where I learned to write. That's where I learned to think critically. But it also gave me this broad exposure to what the world was about and a better understanding that perhaps that as weird and unusual as my own circumstances were, I wasn't the only one who had, a corrupt upbringing, if you will. And so what ended up happening, Mark, when I got very close to graduation, it became very clear to me what I missed out on. I missed having love. I missed having somebody encourage me, approve me, and give me a sense of security and safety and, thoughtful direction and all of those things. And I saw what my peers had going to college and the confidence they had as a result. And I thought, man, how much more successful could I have been in my life if I had been given that kind of support? So without consciously understanding this, And I'm going to tell you that I wasn't aware that I had done this until somebody pointed out to me probably 20 years after I started managing people, that I gave people what I always thought that I had missed out on and would have benefited greatly from had I been, given it.
Right.
So I made people feel safe. I told people how much I valued them. I never let somebody go home on a Friday night not knowing where they stood with me. I thanked people profusely. I taught them. I gave them a vision for what I saw they could possibly become and helped, accelerate their careers in those respects. And I got unbelievable growth and success from every team I ever managed based on what had happened to me. And so I basically confirmed, if you will, that had I gotten those things, I could have been infinitely more successful, but I was able to make people infinitely more successful by giving them those things. And I think the grand conclusion of it, Mark, was that people never outgrow this. People never, we think, oh, he's got a college degree or he's got a master's or he's at least been in the workforce for 20 years or whatever our fantasy is, that people are fully complete and don't need that kind of support. Not only did I prove that they need that support, but I proved that when they get it, the performance is unbelievable, which leads me to the University of Washington. The whole reason I went to the University of Washington is because my company saw me and said, this guy is so talented. We got to do more to cultivate him. And no one ever looked to see what it was that I was doing. They just saw the result and said, he's a good manager and we got to
Right.
help support that, right?
Yeah.
So when my book came out, interestingly enough, a lot of people heard the title, which I think, is Lead from the Heart. And they thought, oh, what happened to him? Did he have a spiritual breakdown or a religious epiphany? Or, they didn't get it at all because no one had ever looked to see what I was doing. They just judged me on the results. So, so the origin story, as you can hear, is a big play in terms of how I ended up doing the work I'm doing today.
Right, that's absolutely fascinating. I'm going to break some of those things down because I've just 3 or 4 things that you've just said in that first introduction. I just have to delve into. So hopefully, it's okay. So your pain and your hurt that your father provided to you. Do you think that was a driving force to be successful at college, to be successful in business, to be a compassionate executive? Do you think that was do you think the pain was a direct result that made you drive to be more successful?
Yes. I mean, I don't really know what my motivation would have been had I not had that upbringing. So
Yeah.
I've always been very competitive. People talk, if the book is called Lead from the Heart, but if you went to people who work for me and said, what's one word that you would use to describe Mark as a manager or a leader? They wouldn't say heart, they would say demanding. So I
Right.
always expected great performance out of people, but I got it because I was able to give them what they needed so that they felt great doing it. They got rewards for it.
Yeah.
They got growth. They got achievement for it, right?
Yeah.
And they had somebody who was really caring and supporting them. So I don't know if that's that drive for performance would have been in me or not, but many people have pointed out that when you're abused as badly as I was, the typical pivot is that you abuse others.
Yes.
So it could have been that, I became, a real jerk for a boss and gave people the same kind of treatment. And I can't explain why I didn't. But what I can tell you is that by giving people caring support, nurturing, if you will, when I saw them achieve, there was this healing element in it for me. It
Right.
was yeah, I would have, and it was so satisfying and so joyful for me to see other people succeed that it kind of helped me make peace with because it was traumatic. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't underestimate the impact on my psyche when you have somebody for 18 years telling you that you're a piece of shit. In all kinds of language. You come to believe it. You doubt yourself. You won't take risks. You won't try things. And even when I was writing my book, it represented a hurdle that was higher than I thought I could achieve. And I had to kind of go back and work through all that and come to terms with it at 50 years old so that I could write the book, because I was like convinced myself that I wasn't a writer, other people are writers, other people are authors, I'm not that person. And even though I had had all the success in my career, that's kind of where it lodged, all that pain growing up. So I had to kind of work through that. So I think ultimately when I saw people thriving and succeeding and grateful to me for what I was doing,
Yeah.
that was the reward that made me want to keep doing it.
Okay, so I've got a couple of other questions about your university days, but I just wanted to take this step. We're going to talk about your approach to managing people a little bit later, but I just wanted to, as you mentioned, your nurturing, your caring side, I just wanted to flag a couple of testimonials and quotes that have been from some of the people that have worked with you, which I've done some research on, and people said that you valued them as employees, you maximized their full potential, you proactively coached them, and you recognized all of their achievements. So I just wanted to flag that now, just to, I'm sure no one else needs any more evidence to that, but that was what people said about you, about your management style and the way that you treated people. So I think you've done a fantastic job of being able to take something that was very negative, which was incredibly difficult. I'm sure it was incredibly difficult, and you've turned that into a career where you've gone and you've helped people and supported people. I really hope there's more managers and executives that are listen to this and actually say, this is how we should treat our employees. That's to get the best out of our people. So I just wanted to flag that there. I hope I didn't embarrass you or anything, but that was
No,
what
no,
actually
not
people
at
said
all.
about you.
No, that's pretty impressive research you did there, Mark. So
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. So as your father threw you out, how did you pay for college? Because from what I understand, it's quite expensive.
Well, I'm a little longer in the tooth, so it wasn't as expensive. But the truth is, it was one of the things that I think, when I left college, that I realized that I wanted to give people most is something we would never think to give people, which is safety, psychological safety, emotional safety, right? And the reason for that is because I never felt safe. So, when I went to college, I went to the University of, if you live in California, your tuition is low. And so, but what I had was to get to a routine where I got up in the morning and I went to school for a few hours. Then when school was over, I went to work and I worked all day. And then when work was over, I went back to school and stayed in the library till midnight. And I did that every single day. Saturday and Sunday, library, right? If you're not working, you're in school. So I didn't have any fun experience. I can tell you that, never went, you know what I mean? I didn't go to parties. I didn't go to, I couldn't. And so I didn't really have a social life in college. But at the same time, once I started to realize the rhythm that I was in, and that the rhythm was helping me succeed in surviving and going to school, I was content with it. So I never really felt like, oh man, I wish I could go to a basketball game, or I wish I could, that just never crossed my mind. I was grateful that I could pull this off. It was sort of like this big miracle where, like, hey, I'm actually doing this, it's happening, it's working. It took a while, and I never had any money, but when everybody was going off to ski trips and Christmas holidays and going home, I doubled down and worked full time so that I could put money away. When school was out in the summer, same thing, didn't go on any vacations, but I saved enough money so that I could get through. I look back at it and I'm like, I don't even know how I did it. I seriously don't. It's something could have broken down, but somehow I managed to do it. I took longer. It took me 5 years to get my undergraduate degree, but mostly because nobody was helping me figure out what to take.
Yeah.
So I was taking classes and I go, this sounds interesting. And then I went and my advisor goes, where do you think you are? And I go, well, I think I've got one more year. And she's like, no, you don't. You have at least 2 more years because you're taking all these classes and don't. And I was so depressed about it. But then I thought, all right, and just keep stepping one step at a time, you'll get
Yeah.
there. It was that kind of a mentality, you know?
Yeah, and it sounds like work ethic was something very important to you, to be able to discipline yourself, to study, to work, to study every day, and as you say, not indulge in the sort of the extras that you get at people at universities. So, do you think you learnt your work ethic at university?
I think it was forced upon me, you know. So I mean, I think as I look back, as a kid, I mean, my father used to tell me, you know, you'll never amount to anything, and he used one of the words that he used to scream at me, and he would use this word pusillanimous. You're pusillanimous, and which is like a really destructive word. It means
Okay.
tactical lack of ambition and drive.
Okay.
That's what my father wanted his 10-year-old little boy to believe. And yet, so went to Catholic school. I was an altar boy. I was a choir boy. I had a paper route. I delivered newspapers 6 days a week. Plus, I went to school and did well in school. I was anything but pusillanimous. So I kind of had, you know, a little bit of that. But I think what happened was I went to a university that was on a quarter system,
Okay.
which meant 10 weeks and it's over. And then you
Okay.
start another. And if you fall behind, that's a very painful experience.
Mm.
And so I think it was imposed on me that if I didn't keep up, if I wasn't that disciplined, I was going to get punished by the universe. So, you know, my first year of school, I had none of that. But I think I was so determined to get through and so wanting and needing that I think I kind of figured out what's the methodology that I'm going to use,
Mm.
and repetitive action was the way to do it. You know, stay consistent,
Yeah.
work, school, study. That's it. You know, no football games, no, you know, no. I had a roommate and they'd sit in front and watched all the Sunday football games, and I'd get up and I'd eat breakfast and I'd drive to college and I'd just stay there for 12 hours, you know, and I'd come home and they'd still be in front of the television. And there was a sense of satisfaction that I made more of my day than they did, you know. So the little reinforcements along the way made it all worthwhile. But I think, you know, I got asked to tutor graduate students in writing, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa! And this is one of the top 10 public schools in the country.
Mm.
So this is a very legitimate, really talented group of people.
Yeah.
And so I started to realize like what I was being told at home wasn't really truthful. I think that's what college taught me, was that you have a lot more talent than you realize. You're not that worthless piece of shit that you were told, and that kind of helped me. So I think I was really grateful for having the experience in a big league school, to have somebody go, you know, you're pretty special. That was very helpful to me.
Well, we're gonna move on, but I'm gonna talk and ask you questions about other experiences that you've had in your career, and I think a lot of this will draw out that you are absolutely worthy of your success that you've had. And I'm sorry that you had a hard upbringing, but I personally think any time that there is hurt or pain or difficulty actually pushes us and actually drives us on to great things. And I've had some recent bereavements in my family, which has really tested my resolve. Um, but I'm convinced that it will actually make me a better businessman, better father, a better husband, and I'm convinced that a lot of painful situations are actually the making of us.
I totally agree with you. However, I think it takes some courage to do what you're doing, Mark, because some people, what happens, it's a pivot, and you have a choice to make, whether it's conscious or unconscious. You can have loss after loss after loss, and you can become bitter by it. and you can see yourself as a victim. And the minute you see yourself as a victim, that victim consciousness ruins your life.
Yeah.
So I applaud you, because if you can see that life isn't fair, life is difficult, and that everybody's going to die around us. It's just so if you have a preponderance of death around you,
Mm.
it's just you have a higher concentration of it,
Yeah.
of something that we're all going to experience, right?
Yes.
That's a healthier way of looking at it than to go, you know what, the gods are against me and I hate the world because of it. And many
Well,
people go there,
my
you know.
like, I'm not completely resolved everything. This is my therapy session time. I'm not completely resolved on all of the issues that I've got to face, but I'm incredibly lucky. I've got a supportive wife and two beautiful daughters, and I've still got a lot of life to live, and I've got to impart knowledge and share and nurture and build my children's life. So um, I very much am trying not to let that sort of, obviously it's difficult and it's hard to get through at times, but I still see that I've still got a lot to give, and the sort of victim mentality I think is a little bit easy for people if they really do go down that avenue. They're taking the easy way out, because it's harder to step up and be a better father or be a better husband or be a better businessman,
Yeah,
supportive manager, whatever that is.
yeah,
It's harder to do that, but it's the better way.
it is the easier way out. That's why I'm commending you. You're not
Oh, thank
taking
you.
it.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. All right. So your experiences at university, you then went into the banking world, the dog eat dog world of banking. What was your what was your drive? What was your what made your decision to go into one of the most competitive areas of business?
You know, 20-year-old's mentality of that looks interesting is pretty much what it was. You know,
Okay.
I'll tell you an interesting story. This sounds very kind of weird, but so my company, years later, many years later, the CEO of our company, a very large financial institution, he picked 20 people in the company that he thought was doing a fantastic job,
All
and
right.
he brought us all to Hawaii, and it was the same time as Mardi Gras in America. So they
Yeah.
had this Mardi Gras like themed party. He had a band, and he wanted everybody dancing. But when we got there, there was a palm reader, and everybody was lined up. You can imagine, you know, the Harlequin, the people on stilts, the
Yeah.
flame
Yeah.
eaters, and all those kinds of things. It was very exotic, right? So, so my wife and I were there, you know, walked over, and so she's doing the palm reading, and she takes my hand and she looks at me and she says, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Well, I'm a banker." And she goes, "Well, you shouldn't have been, and you won't be for long." Now, this is after a 20-year career, right? So about an hour later, you're getting food and you're getting a drink and you're talking to other people, and now there's a tarot card reader.
Yeah.
So my wife and I go to the tarot card reader. He goes, "Pick 3 cards," and she goes, "For a living." I go, "You walkie talking with the, you know, you're asking me the same question that the woman with the palm reader." And she's just
Yeah.
looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. So she takes the 3 cards and she goes, "What do you do for a living?" And I go, "I'm a banker." And she goes, "You're not a banker, that's for sure. That's not who you were put here to be." So I found that really fascinating. I mean, I literally was suspicious that they were in cahoots, that they were into each other, you know, but they weren't. And what I don't know how to, you know, get a sense of what it was that they were reading or what they were able to detect. But I look back and I think I had just enough technical expertise to be capable, but what I think I was a leader, and I could have taken it anywhere. I was a
Right.
very good leader of people, And
Yeah.
that's why I kept getting promoted. Nobody was going, that guy's a technical genius. That's not what they were hiring. That's not what they saw in me. And
Yeah.
so, in order to make sure that I had the competency, I took a whole bunch of classes and everything imaginable, real estate, got licenses, securities licenses. I did all that so that I would have that competency.
Yeah.
But what they kept promoting me for was my ability to get other people to perform at high levels. And I
So
think
that's
I could
really
have taken that anywhere. 20 years old, 22 years old, that's what I was thinking I should be doing.
so you were successful in the banking world. How do you think your approach or your view of your employees was different to some of your colleagues?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question because first of all, I didn't know what it was. So I hired a woman, she was still in college. I was given this opportunity to pilot something and build something from the ground up. And that ended up at a very young age, early in my career, very early. They gave me this ridiculous opportunity. And of course, it all worked out beautifully. And
Good.
I hired this woman, and she was one of my star employees. And so through the course of all the progression, every time I got promoted, I would take her with me to somewhere else that I went.
Yeah.
So now I've got somebody who's been working with me for 18 years.
Yeah.
And out of the blue one day, she said, you manage people very differently, right? And I said, well, no, I don't. And I think what it was, Mark, was that if you do something and you get the outcome you want, you don't go back and go, I wonder what it was. At least I
Yeah.
wasn't. You
Okay.
just keep doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So when she pointed it out to me, I said, well, what do you mean? Like, what are some of the things? And so that list that you were talking about a minute ago that you had read from former employees,
Yeah.
that's not what everybody else was doing, and I wasn't aware of it. So when she pointed out to me that I was doing it differently, I started to look at my peers, and most of my peers were managing with fear and intimidation.
Yeah.
Something bad is going to happen to you if you don't get your numbers, if you don't
Yeah.
perform, if you don't
Yeah.
do what I need you to do. You're going to be out of favor. I'm going to make your life miserable. And even if it wasn't explicit, it was
Yeah.
implicit.
Yeah.
Whereas I had a much different vision. So she helped me articulate what it was that I was doing differently. And once I realized it, then I found I'm clearly an outlier in relationship to how most people were performing in this environment.
So it's a bit of a left field question. What fascinates you about people? Because what we've spoken about so far is about your nurturing and the way you wanted to bring people along. You had a loyal lieutenant who came with you with every different role that you did. What do you think actually fascinates you about people?
I think, one of the big ones is that I don't know too many people that had the experience that I had growing up, but I share that story in greater detail when I speak, and it also represents the preface of my book.
Mm.
So when people hear that story, they often reach out to me and they say, I had something like you did. I just spoke Saturday.
Mm.
PhD students
Mm.
getting their doctorates,
Mm.
right? And I had people come up to me afterwards, several. I just want to let you know, I had a similar upbringing. And so what I've learned is that it's not identical, but people feel that they didn't get something in the way that they were raised. It
Yeah.
limited them in some way.
Yeah.
Parents telling them, oh, you shouldn't try that. That's not going to be don't try to be an actor or don't try to be a writer or you can't make any money doing art or whatever the fantasy is that we hold people back and people get logged into this. So I think this is an unusual way of answering your question, but I think we're all kind of operating out of our childhood selves. And so I play a little bit of an amateur psychologist when I'm working with people. I think there's a lot more potential in people than they often see in themselves.
Yeah.
And so when I can say, I see potential in you and I am committed to helping you bring it out, that speaks so deeply to people's hearts. It's like you would do that for me.
Yeah.
You would help me see something in me and you're going to bring it out. And so I think there's much more potential in people than we give them credit for. We think they're fully baked by the time they come in, and then we put a frame around them and go, oh, Mark, he's a technology guy. What does he know about marketing, or what does he know about sales, or we just label. And the number of times that I've taken over teams where the predecessor manager goes, "Hey, Mark, just want to let you know, Bill's a loser, Susie's a loser, Tommy's a loser. You know, you're never going to get anything out of these people, so don't try." Those are the people I went to immediately because everybody had left them for dead, and all I said to them was, "Hey, clean slate. You and I are going to do great things together if you'll meet me halfway. I'm going to do everything I can do to help you. If you will allow yourself to blossom and to see yourself as maximizing the potential, I'm going to get you there." And like I had people crying just saying that to them.
And this is the thing. I think your approach is so unusual for the banking world. So I've got a couple of friends who are bankers and who are, if I say money driven, they probably would go yes, of course, but equally they're not people. They're not inspired by people. They're inspired by their profit margin or what they need to deliver, their targets, etc. So this is why I asked you earlier on about, like, what do you think your view is different to other type of bankers, is because I think it is so unusual. And that's probably why you fashioned a successful career in the bank, was because you actually approach things differently and looked at people differently and looked at a problem that you had, and you looked at it with a people focus rather than just am I reaching my target, am I hitting my deadline. So that's not actually a question, but it was just more of a comment. What you just said was about making the fully committed to your employees. So one of the things I read, and this is sort of influenced by one of your quotes, was, so what motivates people to fully commit to do extraordinary work? So I think you quoted to say that you have to get people to be fully committed to doing extraordinary work. How do you motivate people to do that extraordinary work?
Well, the big thesis of the book and my whole philosophy is that we think, Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." And that's not true. There's tons of science now that proves that we are feeling, sensing people. Our feelings and emotions drive our behavior. There's also science, which is what gave me permission in my mind to call the book Lead from the Heart, that shows that the heart actually isn't just a pump, that it's playing a role in our choices and our decisions, and that's where some of the feelings come in. The heart and the mind are in constant communication.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you're having a conversation with somebody and he's like, "Oh, I went on my yacht this weekend and we went out to dinner and I'm going to Wimbledon," and you're like, "God, I gotta get this guy off the phone. I don't want to talk to him anymore. He's annoying me." That starts with a feeling more than it does with the thought. The feeling happens, "This guy is boring me, it's tedious, and now I got to get off." That's the way it works. So what I'm really saying is, if you can make people feel, you can make experience positive emotions by demonstrating them that you care about them, like they're not threatened, that you want to help them grow, that you're going to teach them, that you are kind to them, which sounds like soft management 101.
Not at all.
Right?
Yep.
But kindness affects people. It's like, we don't really want our boss to be yelling at us or telling us what we're not doing or constantly challenging us. "Where are you on this? Where are you on this?"
Yep.
Really, what people thrive in is intention. So I give them the north, which is, this is the goal, you're accountable for it. And then it's really recognizing them for effort, recognizing them for accomplishment. It's not, "Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?" In the meantime, it's, "Hey, what's going on with your family? How are you doing? Any challenges?" Making sure that people feel appreciated for what they've done and seen, and that you're actually articulating it. "I saw what you did. I saw the extra effort you put in. I know you were coming in early. I know you were staying late." Allowing people to sort of savor the victory. This isn't what we do in business. It's like, hit the goal and get on to the next one. And so what I do is I make people feel something, and we are hardwired to reciprocate this. There's a professor in the United States, his name is Robert Cialdini, Cildini. He wrote one of the top-selling business books of all time called Influence.
Okay.
And one of the things that he says in Influence is that this instinct to reciprocate goes back to prehistoric times. I have a piece of meat, you don't have a piece of meat. So, as to help our species survive, I'm going to give you a piece of meat.
Yep.
But next time you have a piece of meat, you have an obligation to give it back to me. That's how it works.
Yep.
So now, Mark, 10,000, 100,000 years later, I knock on your door and I say, "Hi, Mark. I'm your neighbor, Mark Crowley, and I was making chocolate chip cookies, and I've got more than I needed, and I thought I would bring over a tray of cookies to you."
Yep.
Cialdini says, you would think they're going to go, "Oh, thank you so much. I love chocolate chip cookies." Instead, what he says is people go, "Oh, crap. Now I got to do something for him." So we go, "Can I give you a glass of wine? Would you like, can I give you some, we just want to get that hot potato back into the, right? It works the same way. If you care about people, and you have to do it authentically. This can't be a manipulation. It can't, if I do this, is what I'm going to get. It just happens to work that way. That if you care people, the more you give, the more you get back. If you want to boil down my whole philosophy, it's you truly do reap what you sow.
Yeah.
If you are trustworthy, if you're kind, if you're supportive, if you give to people, they want to give back because it's so unusual, but it's also instinctive. It's like I want to give back to this guy because I'm not getting this anywhere else. I've never worked for anybody like this, and I'm so grateful for it. And it's all unconscious. People aren't going, "Hey, I'd really like to do something for him." It just comes out of you.
Yeah.
And that's why I got people to do great things.
Awesome. So slightly different tact now. We're gonna take a diversion from what we've spoken about previously. So what does leadership mean? I know we're 2019. I was going to say the 21st century, but equally it could be what does leadership mean to millennials, the new generation that are coming now? What does leadership mean in the modern society?
Well, we had a tradition that was your revolution. And the thesis is pay people as little as possible, squeeze as much out of them as possible, and then manage them with fear and intimidation, as if to say, if you don't do it the way I need you to do it, when I need you to do it, I have somebody else waiting in the other room who will take your job. Mm-hmm. This is traditional leadership theory. And we still operate this way. And we might think, "Oh no, we're much more evolved," but anybody listening to this can immediately name at least one company that operates this way.
Yep.
And so it's run its course. Let's just put it that way. And I think one of the things that we saw with the millennials is that their parents, many of them, 60, 70% of millennial parents were both working. So they were completely stressed. They weren't home when their kids came home from school. They were always focused on work or exhausted. So when they came home, it was like, quickly make dinner. There wasn't enough time to say, "What's going on with you?" And then they had bosses that were extremely demanding, and they had to work weekends. So now the markets crashed in 2007, 2008. People lose their homes. People lose their 401ks. Millennials saw this as children, and they were like, "Hey, this is not the way I want to live my life. I'm not going to give myself to a boss completely like that, or a company like that. I want to have happiness in my life. I want to have time for my children." So you're seeing now parents, husbands spending time after the babies are born. That was never done in my generation. The father never, took paternity leave. That was never understood. Millennials are saying, "Hey, I want to work from home. I want to have more discretion on when I come in and when I get, just give me the goal, tell me what I need to do, and I want to do that." That completely changes the way we've operated in the past. Now you have Gen Z, and they have just graduated, the very first Gen Z class. Well, they're very technology oriented, right?
Yep.
And they are not really social. So we've got to do more to help them become more socialized because they spent so much time in technology. They don't have what you and I are having right here. It's the ability to have converse, having real communication. So the point is that this command and control style of running people's lives, telling them when they needed to come into work, when they go home, when they take breaks, my way or the highway, none of this works anymore.
Yep.
And we have people that are fighting that tooth and nail
Mm.
because it's like, well, that's the way I was managed, and you're going to get managed the same way. And I'm saying the faster you can adapt and realize that you're dealing with a different animal. If you can respond and realize that it's a different animal and give people what they need and want, as
Yep.
opposed to resenting it and saying, "Well, I never got that,"
Yep.
you're going to accelerate. You're going to accelerate as a leader. And it looks completely controversial to people that have been doing this for a long time because it's like, well, if I can't see them, then they're not working. If they're not sitting in that chair, they're not getting, I work with an accounting firm, like one of your peers, actually. I spoke to them, and one of their big issue is some of these longtime producers, that billable hours, that was the measurement.
Yes.
How many billable hours did you have last year, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's how they compared it. Now it's much more qualitative than it is quantitative. It's not a function of hours. It's a function of what did you do and what did you actually help that organization do. And
Yep.
it spins heads. So if you're locked into that, you're going to hold people accountable consciously or unconsciously for a metric that doesn't matter to people anymore.
Yep.
And so you're going to have to adapt, and it's hard for some people. Some people are not going to succeed because.
Yeah, so just to break down that a little bit, so I think you're absolutely right. I think it's fascinating to see the future of work and the workplace, and now people are demanding to work remotely, work from home. I think it's an incredibly interesting area, and I think businesses have to, as you said, have to adapt, have to evolve, have to be able to bring this new generation through that they can work remotely. They don't have to be in the same country, and I think that's incredibly important and incredibly interesting because even when I started work, it was which was what, 20 years ago. It's really interesting. Everyone expected you to be in the office. Everyone expected you um, to sit at your desk and not have a break, and work hard and diligently. And your boss walks round and sees you and thinks to themselves, that Mark, he's diligent worker because he's in the office and he's working hard. But now people just don't require that. People don't need that. Sometimes bosses still believe they need that, but you're absolutely right in that a lot of this Generation Z and millennials are sort of saying, well, we don't need this. If you want to hire us, you might have to treat us differently. I think it's an incredibly fascinating area. Do you want to just go into a little bit more detail on that? Because I'm really interested to hear your view on the distinguishing factors and the new workforce that we're building.
Well, I think one of the complaints about millennials is that they're not loyal; they're disloyal, and so they'll come on board and they're opportunists and they want to learn something, and then out the door they go.
Yeah.
And so people of the Generation X, and particularly baby boomers, they look at that and they go, these are mercenaries, so why would I want to invest in them, right? All that.
Mm.
And there's a resentment there. Well, it's not that millennials don't want to be loyal. It's that companies aren't giving people anything to make them loyal. So, you ever heard that whole expression of, if you put a frog in cold water and then you turn the flame up, they'll sit in the boiling water until it kills them. But if you drop a frog into boiling water, that they'll jump out
Yeah.
immediately. That's the difference. And millennial comes into an organization and says, I'm not getting my needs met. They don't hesitate for a minute to go, well, just means I'm going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Whereas in my generation, at least, you sucked it up.
Yeah.
You put up with every shitty boss there was, right? No matter what it was, no matter what the expectations were. And I have a millennial son, and he was like, no way I want any part of that. And I'm like, hey, maybe you should remember that I paid for your college and, and provided for you. But that's not the point. The point was it's repellent to them to live a life like that.
Mm.
And so I look at that and I just think, if you just like get comfortable with people not sitting in front of you and still holding them accountable for performance, you're going to get great results. This isn't going away. Technology is only going to make this faster. So get on board this train. This isn't going away. But some organizations, it's like presenteeism that matters more than productivity, which is completely stupid.
And the other thing I just wanted to pick up on what you said is a really interesting. So I work for a big four accountancy firm and in technology, and it's really interesting the transition. This is only in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe, that at the accountancy firm, you were expected to do billable hours, which you charged to your client, and it was whatever grade you were times by the hours, and that gave you what you billed the client. Now, especially in technology, but I think in other parts of the business as well, people are now thinking about value billing and what value do you add to the business by providing a technology solution. And it's not how many hours that you've done to implement it. It's a different type of mentality. So you said you work with a accountancy firm. Do you find that still a barrier to working for these companies to work with clients?
This is one of I won't tell you what company it is, but it's one of your peers. And, right. And I think they're pretty evolved. That's not to say that they don't have managers who are, struggling with this.
Yeah.
Because it's like your whole identity. If like billable hours is your metric, you take that away, it harms people. Yeah. Because it's like, well, how do I, it's like simple as this. I have a pizza restaurant, I'm running a franchise, and the owner of the company comes in one day and says, you know what, we think there's a bigger market in chicken.
Yeah.
And I'm like, chicken? I've been doing pizzas for 25 years. I can spin that pizza and I can make 20 pizzas in 10 minutes, and I'm like an expert, and I don't know anything about chicken. Yeah. So how does that make people feel? It makes them feel sick and vulnerable and, and transcended. Now all these people coming in, they're all chicken experts. And you're like, I don't know it. And I was the king of the world. People loved me because I had the highest number of billable hours. And now, right? And yeah. So this is where I think one of the things that this organization does that I think other organizations need to do is they need to make those people that were making pizzas know that they're going to get good at doing chicken.
Yeah.
You're not devalued. You're going to be okay. We're going to help you. It doesn't diminish you. I know it feels odd, but we're going to help you get there.
Yeah.
And what we do is we go, fend for yourself. If you don't figure out how to do chickens, then we'll get somebody in who does. And that is the big mistake because it shuts down people, shuts down their emotions. They go into fear. It's all the, toxic chemicals that are in people's bodies. They're just marinating in stress hormones, the actual opposite of what brings out people's optimal performance. So if you can make people feel safe and feel like, hey, it's okay. We made the decision that we're going to be doing this. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to teach you how to do it because you're smart enough to figure out how to do billable hours. You're going to be smart enough to do value pricing. It's like, oh, okay. It's helping people get over that.
Yeah, and a lot of people have fear and sort of are scared of change, and the way the world is evolving so fast now with technology. I think we're really at the point where you need to adapt or die, basically. So I totally agree. So I'm just going to flick back about back to your career. So apart from the palm reader and the tarot card person lady, what made you leave your banking career?
Well, they were the reason.
They were
No,
actually the
I'm kidding.
reasons.
They were. All you need to do is go to a party and have a palm reader
Yes,
tell you
there we go.
banking, give up a 20-year career. Well, what happened was, so 2 years before I left, maybe 3 years before I left, my company came to me and they said, we think you have the potential to run a business that you have no expertise in. So this is another example of having no business running something, but people thinking that I should be running it.
Mm,
So they gave me the investment business, the investment sales business. So
okay.
all the people, so there were like 750,000 people, stockbrokers, and then, like stocks and bonds
Yeah.
and those mutual funds, and then another like 1,250 people doing like more of a junior level, but basically a couple thousand people selling investments all over the company.
Right.
So they gave me that job, even though I've never sold the stock in my life, but I managed those people.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, the people that were now reporting to me were very threatened because like, guy doesn't have any of this background. Why would they put him in charge?
Mm.
And so they said, well, that whole caring thing that you did for the bank people, that's never going to work with these brokers because they don't get paid unless they sell, and all they want to be is left alone. They don't want training. They don't want coaching. They don't want you coming in. They just want you produce, because that's where they make their money. And I go, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Don't, just trust us. We know they don't want you around. They don't want to don't get involved with them. Just leave them alone. So I got on the plane and went 25 of the top brokers in the company. And I go, hey, like, what can I do to help you be better? And like some of these guys had tears in their eyes, and they're like, you don't have to do any more. You flew to come see me in my office. Like nobody's ever done that before,
Right.
And I'm like, what else are you missing? Nobody coaches us. Nobody develops us.
Right.
Nobody gives us any time. All they think is, we want money. It's all completely right.
Yeah.
So I go, well, I'm here to help you. So we had, in my first year, we had record profit, record revenue. I was named leader of the year. There's my trophy. This is leader of the year, and then we got into the recession and the bank failed for no reason. It just got caught up in the whole lending problem in America. And so the bank was actually failed, had nothing to do with the business that I was involved with, but the bank failed and was sold in an instant.
Okay.
And so I'm at a very senior level, and I stayed. So I stayed for 6 months, and I was so repelled, so massively repelled by how they were leading that organization and how they created no trust and how they disrespected people, devalued people, told them basically, we don't care if you stay or don't stay, we're going to run it our way. And so, of course, they ran off everybody, negotiating a package, and I left. And I thought, well, I'll probably go back to work. And then I thought, this would be a good opportunity for me to write the book that I've always wanted to write. But the book that I wanted to write wasn't the book that I ended up writing. So it became this evolutionary process. The more I immersed myself in it, the more I realized I actually have something to say here. This isn't just a bucket list challenge of writing a book. I actually have something. So I invested the time in it, and so the best thing that ever happened was that organization failing, because I probably would have stayed there, otherwise, and never have done this. So like my upbringing seems like it was meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So leading on to your book, so your book's called Lead from the Heart. Something that I was reading about in my sort of prep was that your book was recognized as being ahead of its time. And I think I'm right in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that your sales of your book. Sorry, say that again. I got break. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Oh, back up. I can.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah, you went
Yeah, I can hear
away.
you. I don't know what happened there. Sorry
You
about
said
that.
that the book.
Yeah, it was it was
That's
it was, it
okay.
was just
Can you
mentioning your
link?
book that did it.
Oh yeah.
So back to the story. So you wrote this book, Lead from the Heart, and part of my reading was that um, it was recognised as being ahead of its time. Now, was that right? Did was there a delay in sort of people picking up on your book and making it as successful as it eventually was?
Well, it wasn't judged ahead of its time. It was judged as like irrelevant. So it's not like somebody goes, "Oh, 5 or 6 years from now, this book is going to be
Well,
much more
yes.
successful."
I
No,
think
but it's an
people who
important.
said that about recognizing ahead of the time were people post event. Was
But
that
it's only now that we're able to see that.
right?
But it's interesting. So the book is out. The book is published, and I'm ready to go. And I had an acquaintance of mine recommend a woman who is a professional strategist for authors, book authors. It's all
Right,
she does.
right,
So I paid her $10,000, and her job with that $10,000 was simply to give me a strategy. No tactical plan,
yeah,
just what's true north. And so she read my book, she read my articles, podcast hadn't come out yet. That's
okay,
all she had to go with. And she said, "Okay, I'm ready to give you my decree here."
yeah,
And I go, "Okay." Well, I got two plans. One plan you're going to hate, but it's the one I recommend. And then there's plan B. And I said, "Well, all right, what's plan A?"
yeah,
And she said, "You're going to fucking fail if you continue to use the expression lead from the heart."
right,
And I said, "Have you cashed that check yet?" You know. And so what she was telling me was the world is not ready for your message, and it certainly isn't ready for that language.
mm,
That's really what she was saying. In fact,
right,
use killer engagement or some, generic kind of. She goes, "You'll do fine with that." And she goes, "Just slip in the heart stuff later on."
yeah,
you know but that's neither authentic or real. But
yeah,
I have the science behind me, Mark. That's what gave me the trust in using lead from the heart, because we know that the heart is really the driving force of engagement.
yeah,
So I had to make a decision. Do I bullshit my way through this until people catch on, or do I take the punches until people catch on?
yeah,
And so I own that language, lead from the heart. I mean, in the sense that, like, when people thought it was the softest, weakest, most sentimental, somebody saying this doesn't get business kind of an idea,
yeah,
I had to say it's truth, and I'm going to wait for the world to come to me.
right.
And that's what's happening now. It's really happening now. It's fascinating to me.
It
And I can say fascinating.
I think it's totally admirable that you stuck to your guns. You remained authentic, and what you believed, even with scientific evidence, just to be able to stick to your guns to say that this is my message, this is what I want to give out to people, and this is what I'm going to share with people. I think is completely commendable, and that's why I think people have said post event that you were ahead of your time, because now um, with society which is more accepting of the heart being part of the story of business people as well is incredibly important. So a lot of the people I follow on podcasts and Instagram and various posts that people give, a lot of people are now talking about um, your head and your heart both work together to deliver the best business or career or managing people. So totally commendable. I think it's now a given, and people now accept it as part of the story as being in business. Where um, even a few years ago, that just wouldn't have been accepted.
Yes. And so, and it wasn't easy, I can tell you. It wasn't just like, oh, I'll just, write out the next 5 or 6 years until people get there. That's a painful journey to go
Sure,
on
sure.
because you believe in what you're talking about and you've got a lot of people dismissing it. That's painful. But, my strategy was to write articles so that people could read them and go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's like, he's not the nut I thought he was. And you keep doing that. And then, my podcast, same thing. And I think, so people could actually hear my voice and go, oh, he's not like the lunatic that I thought he might be.
Yeah,
But, as I'm seeing this now too, Mark, which is, a couple of years ago, nobody was using the word heart, and now it's coming up everywhere.
yeah,
And, I think, well, not many of those people had to pay their dues in order to say that, because
yeah,
now it's much more, but at the same time, I'm proud of the fact that, that I was on the vanguard and helped usher it. But the thing is that this is who I am. Like, I've done this my whole life.
mm,
This isn't a theoretical exercise.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like, I know how to do this implicitly because I've done it my whole career.
yeah,
And so it's one thing to say, we have to bring head and heart into leadership, and it's another to understand how to do it
yeah.
and why it works. And that's kind of what I think I've been able to perfect through all this. So,
Good. So you mentioned your podcast. That's also called Lead from the Heart podcast. Is that right?
yes.
Good. What would you say so one of the things that I am constantly thinking about is who's my target market? Who am I aiming towards? I've been thinking about this a lot recently. The guests I have on. Anyway, who would you say your target market is for your podcasts?
So I don't really know the answer. So, because I went about it a different way,
Okay.
as I've done with all of this.
Yeah.
So I I believed at the beginning of this, when the book came out, I believed that a wise, enlightened CEO reading my book would go, "Oh my God, this is breakthrough. What he's saying basically revolutionizes the way we think about leadership, and I'm going to get ahead of it." And instead, they didn't. They just dismissed it, right?
Yeah.
So, but now what I see is that where this is percolating is bottom up. So people that are employees,
Mm,
I wrote this article about millennials, had like 800,000 people read it.
yeah.
And the comments are all from millennials saying, hey, thanks for getting us. Thanks
Yeah.
for understanding us. It
Yeah.
wasn't for the people that I wrote it for, which is the people on the other side, and say, here's how you manage these people,
Yeah.
right? So, so the whole idea with the podcast was so that people could hear me personally and
Yeah.
understand, like, hey, he gets this, right? I understand this. But the guests that I have on, there's no accident. So I get a lot of requests. I would love to be on your podcast. The reason that I pick people to come on the podcast is because their work in some way, shape, or form directly validates the whole thesis.
Right.
And not to say that any of them or all of them produce their work with that ambition. It just so happens that it's to be true. So,
Right.
for example, Amy Edmondson, who's a professor at Harvard Business School, she's written a book about psychological safety. Well,
Yeah.
she's like, it was like this intimate conversation we had.
Yeah.
And she was sort of surprised by how much I understood about psychological safety.
Yeah.
What she didn't know was the whole conversation was about me back in college worrying about my car breaking down and not being able to graduate from college, and how unstable I felt and why safety meant something to me. I could embrace that in a much more, in a very different way than anybody else could. And it made me ask questions about psychological safety that I think astonished her. Like,
Right.
how do you know this? And like, you're not an academic, you're not at Harvard, right? But you understand this better than most
Yeah.
because I lived it, And so I think that's what's happening is the people that are coming on and they're all at that level. Tom Peters, people at this level,
Right.
they're kind of surprised. They're surprised because I've had the experience my whole life of leading this way and managing this way. And then when I read their work, I go, wow, like this is complete validation. So I zero in on that.
Right.
And I think people hearing this are hearing a very different kind of a conversation than, so tell us about your book. It's not that conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you said something here that I really want to dig into. And people go, like, no one ever asked me that question before. That's kind of the goal of the podcast, is to make
Awesome.
it really kind of unusual. But I think people are beginning to go, wow, this whole thesis actually makes sense.
I totally agree. You have won me over completely about how to approach. I approach managing and leading from there are leaders all through the business. It's not just at the very top. You should aim to be a leader. When I first started my career, I didn't think of myself as a leader, but as I've grown into the role and the knowledge, I actually think leadership permeates all the way through, and it's not just your execs or your chairman or even your partner that is driving that. I think leadership and caring and support should come from all grades.
Not everybody has the inclination to do that. And still,
True.
many people don't even think that's the role of a leader. It's like, hey, I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad.
Yeah, yeah,
You take responsibility for your career. I took responsibility for mine. I'm not. You don't have to be looking to me for all this. Go figure it out on your own.
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that mentality,
Yeah,
and it's wrong. It's just patently wrong.
yeah,
So you have to be a giver if you're going to be in leadership. You
yeah.
simply do. You clearly have an inclination for that.
Right. So from any area, whether it's business, sports, politics, wherever you like. So what leader from the past or present do you most admire and why?
Abraham Lincoln,
Okay.
American president,
Yeah.
16th president. And obviously, in American history, he got the country, we're the only time we've ever had a civil war.
Yeah.
And he managed to get the country back united, right? He emancipated the slaves. So this
Yep.
is a guy who, you know, had unbelievable courage, unbelievable vision for what he believed needed to have happen. But if you read about him, if you read his history, you will find that he had a quote that said, in order to win a man to your cause, you have to first win his heart, the great high road to his reason. So this is a guy who understood that feelings and emotions drove behavior. And so he applied that by, his team of rivals, by bringing in people who were against him. He made them feel like, wow, who else would do that? So they
Yep.
worked to support him. That was a very, really amazing kind of leadership thinking. And so I think this is one of the reasons why he's seen as if not the greatest, the number one or number two greatest American president ever.
I would agree. And one of the things that I think has littered, I'm not an expert on American politics, but I did actually study it at university. But one of the things of American presidents is a real leveler is whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, when a Democrat works with Republicans to make a better future for America or vice versa, that's a true leader and a true inspiring leader. And I think unfortunately there's been a catalogue of really potentially great presidents that didn't work with their opposition as well as their own party.
The human species didn't survive by competing. The human species survived by supporting one another and collaborating and cooperating.
Yeah,
And the more leaders understand that, the better off we're going to be. Does that mean you may have to compromise sometimes?
yeah,
Yes. But if you want to get anything done, you're going to have to work with people who you think are your enemies. And the
yeah,
truth is, that's a construct. They're not your enemies. They just happen to see things different.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just it's when you lead the way you just described, it's just laziness. It's like, I'm just going to go full steam ahead with the way I want it, and I'm going to roll over all the people that stand in my way. that doesn't work long term. That's not an effective strategy. And it does early on. You go, look, I mowed them all down. I got where I wanted to go. I'm the hero. But we're seeing it in our own society. It's just simply not a sustainable way to lead. You're going to have to get along with people. You're going to have to cooperate. You're going to have to accept that people have difference of opinions. The world is diverse.
Yeah.
And we want to, like, no pun intended, whitewash the whole thing and just say, this is the way it is and this is the way it has to be. And it's just completely stupid, completely naive.
So I won't dwell on politics for too much longer. So one of the people that I studied was Lyndon B. Johnson, and to be able to get through the legislation that he got through because he'd been in politics for such a long time and he'd worked with both sides of the parties, and I think also helped him. A couple of people owed him a few favors and things like that, and he called them in, and so that's for me a shining light on how to make things something that was incredibly difficult for America to deal with, the race issue, as it is, I suppose, these days. But at that time, and that a president that came in and was able to play the politics, but equally understand the society that he was living in. So I've got a great deal of respect for Lyndon B. Johnson. I think he was a great president.
Well, that took a lot of courage, right?
Yes.
To do what he did. But it also, we go back to the whole Robert Cialdini thing we were talking about earlier about influence and about, this idea that there's reciprocity. Lyndon Johnson, was this master of building relationships with people on both sides and doing things for them. In anticipation. This might be slightly manipulative on his part, but he knew, I think he was smart enough to understand that there was a marker there. I do something for you, one day I'm going to call it in. I need you to do something for me. I'm not a big fan of that sort of this idea that it's tit for tat. I don't think that's the best way to go about it. But the truth is that he was able to leverage relationships that he had cultivated without getting anything at the time. And that is brilliant.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Right. Wrapping up, I've got a couple of last questions for you. And the first one is, so what do you want to achieve still in your career?
Well, I want the parade. No, I'm just kidding. I want, I'm doing this work to be the catalyst for change. And I want this language, lead from the heart, I want it to go from this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and this is soft leadership. And everybody knows you don't bring the heart into leadership, to, of course you lead from the heart. Yep. That's where I want to take it. I want the world to see this is truth, that this is human truth, this is spiritual truth, this is universal truth. And we fear, the truth is, we fear that if I manage people this way, it's going to backfire. They're not going to be productive. We're not going to hit our numbers. We're not going to be profitable. And so that's where all the resistance comes in. And the truth is, if we hire caring leaders who still hold people accountable, but have an inclination to really support other people, really make sure that they can help people get where they want to get to, not just produce for me, produce for me, that we won't just change the world in terms of people's satisfaction with their jobs and their health and their well-being, which is all going to come from this, but we're going to see organizations succeed in unbelievable ways because you've got everybody willing to row.
Yeah.
Everybody is rowing. Why wouldn't you row if you're told all of your needs are being supported? They hold their oar, or they pull their oar out of the water, or they try to sink the boat. And any of those motivations, if you can eliminate those just by doing what we know human beings need, that's why I'm doing this. I really want to see the massive shift that this could bring. So, I obviously think, Mark, that I was put on the planet to do this. I had parents, I'm for a reason. I had my father's whole experience, getting kicked out, having the 20-year history of proving it and understanding it and writing the book and having the delay and getting people to respond to it so that I could learn more about it. I look at this and I gotta go, this was a mistake, or this was like, accident? I don't think so. I think I'm here for a reason, and the reason is to be one of the voices for change.
So they say never talk about politics or religion. So we've covered politics already. So you mentioned just then about spirituality. Is that important to you? Are you? Is that something that's a big thing for you? So I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, please, thank you.
Would you say spirituality, whether it's God or a greater being, whatever it is, is that important to you?
Yes, I mean, I think it's the bigger question isn't so much is it important to me, is it important to most people?
Okay.
And while we know that, like, people, the number, studies, Gallup research shows that the number of people who go to church every Sunday decline. So what that means is that people are less religious, organized religion.
Mm.
But the number of people that are seeking some spiritual understanding
Yes.
is like one's going down, the other one's going opposite direction in the same way.
Yep.
And I think that work is spiritual. I think that it boils down to the heart, which, every spiritual tradition says the heart is your connection to your higher source. So even if you don't believe in a higher source, there's a feeling that you get when you're doing the right work, or you're having an impact, where you see the results and people appreciate you. I think that's a deeply spiritual thing. So, I've steered clear. I already came out with the heart. So I don't normally talk about that because it's like I'm already got one mark against me. But now that the world is beginning to see that the heart maybe will let the heart get in the door, now it's, the next stage of this is to say, well, they are kind of connected, and this is something that people are looking for. I think meaning and purpose are spiritual things. I don't think it's how you feel inside about your life and about your well-being and your health and what you tell yourself. And we know our thoughts manifest. So if you're like, I'm in a shitty job and I've got a boss who doesn't care about me, all that can do is lead to bad thoughts, bad health, bad well-being, bad satisfaction and happiness. So I think that's all spiritual. Just my opinion.
I totally agree. I not an area we usually go to on this podcast, but I thought it was worth asking because I do agree that there is a yearning, there is a desire for some sort of spirituality, whether it's meditation, whether it's a God, or whether it's God, or whether. So I would 100% agree. All right. So the last question. So it's not really a question. It's sort of where can people find you? Where would you like people, if they want to find out more about your book, or your career, or your podcast? Where can people find you?
All roads lead to Rome, Mark. So there's the same website, two different names. One is markcrowley.com, and then if you forget that, leadfromtheheart.com will get
Awesome.
you there too.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate it. I think we've really touched areas which we don't often go in my podcast. So thank you from my heart, not to be so cliche, but thank you from my heart that you've come on and shared your knowledge, your experience. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. All right. So everyone, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. I'm just a couple of things. You can find me in the usual places on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, on Patreon as well, if you'd like to join the crowdsourcing there on Patreon. Equally, I've just set up a new email account, which is called absolutebusinessmindset@gmail.com. If you've got any comments, thoughts, ideas that you'd like to share with me, improvements, whatever you would like to share with me, then please do that through my email address. So thank you very much. This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast. I appreciate your time. Thank you.